Okay, so this video is just describing a jeans pattern. So this is a men's trouser block there, and this is kind of, I suppose, designed on men's trousers, but the women's wear version would be very similar, just slightly different shapes and maybe 2 darts in the back, and there may be a dart in the front. Okay, but everything else would be the same. So you could use this lesson for either. So really what you have here is the trouser blocks. So they're set up like this is the construction. Okay, so notice they're lined up across the knee and at the hip. They're slightly separated. So they're all lined up. And really for jeans, okay, aside from just altering anything to do with the leg, which is just your choice coming in and out, or up and down on the hem, the main features you have on jeans would be the fly front and the sort of pocket shapes and the yoke, and then that's the waistband. So here is the construction, this part and this part, and then everything in red around here are all the pattern pieces. None of them have seam allowance on them. But yeah, so you can just notice that on the construction, first you'd have to draw the fly shape in. This is usually about 4 back, could be 5. Could be smaller, could be 3 on women's wear. Sometimes it's 3, but usually 4 or 5 in men's. It comes down a little bit past that sort of level line usually, and is just curved in there. And you just physically draw that on. Be sure there's a straighter grain in that position. So come up with your grain line if you need to extend it and measure over from it to get grain in there. So that way when you trace it off, which is here, this is the pattern piece, it has its grain in it. You can see that this piece is doubled, so it's like it's folded along this line and traced through, and you get this kind of mirrored effect here, this shape, and that's the fly shield. So that's the piece that goes inside to protect your body against the zip coming up and down. Okay, so you get these two from that. The other thing you'd be doing is drawing on your pocket shape. So this I've drawn in a kind of a jeans pocket shape. It would be, I suppose, up to you kind of to draw that shape. Generally this is maybe 6 or 7 centimeters down, could be a bit further, and it's generally a little bit further in, maybe 8-10 centimeters, that kind of rounded shape, or you could angle it or change it a little bit yourself. And then this piece here is the pocket bag. All right, you want to come in 3 or 4 centimeters maybe there, or at least 2 anyway, and then draw a nice shape that the hand would fit in. If this is full scale, often it's a good idea to put your hand in that place and kind of draw around it just to be sure. Now sometimes jeans pockets are kind of a little bit shorter. You might notice when you put the hand in, actually they're a little bit shorter, but I just drew it a little bit longer. It would be your choice. And a lot of time the this piece here, which is really kind of the side body piece, that's it there traced off. So coming along here and down and around, that's actually that piece. Sometimes that piece is broken in half, into 2 pieces, like there'd be a line here, and this part would be done in sort of, say, if it's jeans, in the denim fabric or whatever fabric you're using, and the bottom bit would be done in the lining fabric, the cottony fabric. Okay, in this case and for beginners, I usually just people find the pockets hard enough as it is, and that one extra layer I find often just throws people a little bit over the edge. So I just get people to do this in the fabric, and this one, which is this piece here, in the kind of lining fabric. So they're both really pocket bags. You know, this is kind of the side body piece of the trouser because it includes that bit. So I'm kind of calling that the side body pocket bag, side body / pocket bag. And then this is really the pocket bag to the other side of it, but it's kind of the facing, so it sews up against that. And so I'm calling that the pocket bag facing, just to try and determine the difference between the two of them. Okay, and so they would be all the pieces you'd have for the front along with this. So this would be the trouser piece that you have, and that piece would go, and fill in here, and that would then sew there. Okay, so they'd be all your front pattern pieces. So check that you have them all, check that you have grains on all of them. Sometimes you trace them all off and then you realize there's no grains. You can't just put any old grain in there. You need to, if you have traced them off, go back to your construction, extend this line, measure over, and put a grain line that goes through all the pieces, and you might need a few, and then trace the grain lines on. Also check your notches. You can see there's quite a few notches on this. So this is the hip notch. Hip notch is always marked in on anything. And this is the pocket notch. So this is that shape. That's that position and that position. So when you're sewing it together, you have that position marked. That's very helpful. So I've written them on. Sometimes when you have a lot of notches on something, it's nice to actually physically write what they're for on your pattern. Okay, and same here, you have your notches and your knee line and that. So that's the front. The back then is here. Again, you'd adjust the leg whatever way you want. And then in the back of jeans, a lot of the time you have a yoke and a pocket. Obviously you can do without pockets if you don't want them, or you could also not have a yoke, but the classic jeans do have a yoke. Usually around 2 centimeters down there, could be a little bit more, a little bit less. On men's, maybe around 8 centimeters down there. Again, could be a little more or less. And you draw your line. Now, when you're drawing through, you want to close over the dart while you draw through it. Or else just, draw that line and trace off this shape here and this shape here and place them together. Or maybe trace around the whole piece and fold over that dart, and you'll get a yoke. Okay, and again, notice the grain line there. This isn't the grain line. The grain line is coming from here, so it's slightly different. Even though that's the center back line on this trouser, the grain is slightly different. Okay, now when you draw that line through, you have a little bit of an end of a dart that's remaining, and when it's only a small amount of an end of a dart that's remaining, you can take it off the side there. So that's what that is. So I've wiggled through the end of that dart. I've taken that adjustment off the side because we need this line to match that line when we sew. And there's a discrepancy there of that amount of dart. So we just take it off there and blend it in nicely and smoothly. So that's the adaptation. So there. Then we've done the pocket. Now I just did this in keeping kind of with a men's pair of Levi's. Pockets can be any which way. Any length, any width, any whatever. So I just kind of, the classic Levi's is down about 5 centimeters here and in line with this. So, that might be designer's choice, how to angle that and how to angle a pocket. Men's pockets tend to be 18 wide, so 18 centimeters here. And the Levi's pockets comes in narrower and then comes to a point. But again, you can do it whatever you want. Now, do notice that pocket is angled. Again, that's based on the Levi pocket. Just remember that this part here of the trouser is all going underneath the leg, okay? And remember, this is 3-dimensional, so there's a bum coming here. So actually that pocket looks much straighter when it's on, all right? But you can obviously angle pockets whatever way you want. And a lot of the pockets these days are kind of quite low on men's, to have that sort of dropped and quite long and stuff. So again, that's totally designer's choice what you do with the pocket, but this is the classic sort of Levi's style jeans pocket in this diagram. Okay, and so when we come then down here, that's the pattern piece for the actual leg. Notice you can just kind of dot on the pocket, or even just mark the main points, like the 4 corners or the 5 corners, since there's a point there, because you tailor tack those positions and then you'll know where to put the pocket, or you can just physically draw the whole thing on the pattern. And then that's taken from that line. So the yoke, really, that piece there would so fit in kind of here. Okay. And there is the pocket itself. And then we have the waistband. So the waistband is literally the length of the waist, and then the width you want it. Now often on a lot of waistbands you'd fold it over and you double it. On jeans and stuff, a lot of the time it's 2 different layers and they're sewn at the top. So in this case I just did it like that because that's kind of common in jeans, but on a lot of trousers you would actually just double that in terms of your pattern. This little piece here is the underlay for the button, so it only goes on one side and it's about 4 centimeters usually. So you take the bit that's in black, that's the waist, you find the halfway and draw a line for that's your center back, And then do find the quarter positions, find where the side seams are and put them in as notches. Or you can put SS on there to represent side seam, or even draw a line. I just find drawing a line for the centre back and notches for the side just kind of differentiates them on the pattern. It's kind of handy and you can see what's going on. So that's that pattern piece there represented. Now notice things aren't exactly to scale and everything, so just, I know this one's shorter and wider than that one, but anyway, it's just to represent that would be your pattern piece. It looks pretty much the same as the construction there, but I'm just labeling that's the underlay. It's only on one side. That's your center front, that line really, and that line, they come together and they along the front, your side seam notches. So yeah, so I think that gives you a good outline of what your pattern should look like if you have a trouser that's kind of like a jeans style, and it's just important to look and notice all the notches, notice all the grains, all of that stuff. Actually, I'm noticing there's no grain line in here, so I need to put that in, grain line. Actually, so often the waistband is doubled, and usually that center line I use as a grain, so I think because this is a single, I've kind of forgotten. But the grain line would usually go that way, because that's the way the pressure of the that would be pulled on the waistband, so it's better to have it going lengthways, the grain, if you can. Okay, so now naturally I haven't put any seam allowance on any of this, or labeling. I've put some labels actually. I've just said front trouser, back trouser, given them generally a name, but you need to put the, how many you're cutting instructions, and that. And in terms of seam allowance, most everything would have 1.5. Sometimes pockets have smaller seam allowances, just especially the patch ones that go on and sew on, because you just don't want to turn in a large amount of fabric. But on jeans, actually, they would have a 1.5. The denim's quite thick, and you need a substantial amount of seam allowance to fold in. And on the top of the jeans pocket, you might need 2 or 2.5, because it folds in on itself and folds in again, and it's kind of machine stitched. So that's a difference there in seam allowance. So larger kind of, it's really kind of almost like a little facing there, and then seam allowance. But other than that, I think regular seam allowance for everything else. Okay, so hopefully you can check if you have done a pattern. It could be a little bit different to this, but this might give you some information so that you can check that all of your pieces are correct, and have all of the correct markings and straighter grains and everything else. All right, so good luck with that pattern.